Happy Women's History Month from yours truly, Dr. Cunningham.
Welcome to Life Lessons with Dr. Cunningham, where who you are matters more than what you do. This channel features high level professionals who share their lived experience with us. And we thank you so much for Kim Bush Esquire being here with us today. How are you today, Kim?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me, Dr.
Yeah,
Cunningham.
Kim joined Allied World in 2011. And from 2011 until March 2016, Kim was responsible for managing the defense of employers and employment litigation, discrimination, harassment, retaliation, etc., and the defense of public entities like police departments, cities, towns, and their officials and school boards. And in April 2016, Kim joined the US programs TPA Operations Group, where she is responsible for the supervision and oversight of the investigation, evaluation, and resolution of a myriad of litigated and non litigated actions in the areas of employment, general liability, property, public entity, medical malpractice. Now, there's so much to it. I would like to be able to share that she graduated law school from what school did you attend?
Quinnipiac
Quinnipiac
University,
University. Okay, awesome. And then where did you go to school for undergrad?
Southern Connecticut State University.
Great school. Yes, I've been a adjunct over there based on stats that were received through the American Bar Association that the enrollment of underrepresented students is about 31% law schools. At the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean those are the ones that translate to becoming lawyers, or passing the bar, but like it starts off with about 30% being minority, and so that's an encompassing of Black, Caribbean, or all different BIPOCs, all in one. And so I'm wondering, when you are looking at who is a part of the candidates to even select from, is it like finding a needle in a haystack, or are there a lot of them that you can even choose from, with regards to the diversification within the workforce?
Yeah, it's not fun. It's not like finding a needle in a haystack. I think that
That's
is,
good.
part of the narrative that's out there. The excuse that people make, oh, they can't find good candidates. No, you're just not looking in the right places, and you're not being intentional about seeking out candidates that you wouldn't normally consider, right? Because when you're hiring, the default position is to look for someone who looks like you, has shared interests, shared values. Maybe they went to the same school, So if you approach hiring from that mindset, you're not going to be intentionally seeking out job boards that may cater to, the BIPOC community. You have to seek out job boards that cater to the BIPOC community. Everyone's not on, well, maybe 5 years ago, everyone wasn't on LinkedIn. That's changing now. LinkedIn has definitely become way more streamlined, and you can find excellent candidates, of all nationalities and ethnicities on LinkedIn. But then you also have, bar associations that cater to specific ethnicities. So you have the Black Bar Association, you have the Asian American Bar Association, just the Asian, you have the Hispanic, Bar Association. So you have different avenues and venues that you can intentionally seek out to diversify your candidate pool. And some of the brightest and best don't always go to Harvard. They don't always go to Yale. They don't always go to these Ivy League schools. So not only do you have to diversify in the sense of where you're looking, but you also have to diversify, in terms of the type of schools that you're willing to consider, because that can also, narrow your pool down in terms of, potential candidates. If you're only looking for Harvard grads or Yale grads, you're, limiting a significant population of talented, intelligent, BIPOC lawyers.
Right, completely, agreed. I mean, even being Connecticutans, and the only reason why I know a little bit about this is because I've considered law school before I actually went into, psychology and marriage and family therapy as a doctorate.
Mhm.
But my junior ring has the justice balance on it. So at
Okay.
one point when I was looking at schools, I was looking at places like Quinnipiac, like University of Connecticut, NYU, or, but there are a lot of great schools, even just locally in Connecticut, that, do produce great lawyers.
Yeah. And law school is not an indication of, success as a lawyer. Um, we always like to talk about our former president, George Bush, who was a C student at Yale, but he became the president, and it's interesting. We
Legacy.
have this, yeah, we have this, exactly. I was reading this article too, because, there has been an attack on affirmative action in Ivy League schools and just in schools in general. There's been an attack on that going on for decades. But I was reading this very interesting article, and it kind of flipped the conversation. And it says, we have affirmative action that no one is talking about. And he, in the author of the article, was explaining that you have a certain set of seats set aside every year for the families of the biggest donors, for like wealthy students, that can pay their own way. So there's a significant population of students that are selected based on their financial criteria. So that's another form of quote unquote preferential treatment, quote unquote affirmative action that, no one talks about, particularly when it comes to Ivy League schools.
And that's absolutely an interesting conversation, and very true. There's something to be said about when individuals, because universities essentially, even though they are producing professionals, it is also a business. And so when there are individuals that are willing to pay full tuition and board, I'm not going to say names, but everyone that knows, has watched this channel or has ever looked me up on LinkedIn, what undergraduate university I attended, or any of the universities, let's just say that. But there are times where there were students that did things that they were not supposed to do, but they just kept moving them around from dorm room to dorm room because they were legacy, because they were paying 100%, to attend that university. And so because of that, I completely hear you and I agree. Now, the part that I'm wondering about too, though, is because there is something to be said about, and I'm recently reading about this, so I haven't even completed the particular book, but I started studying a little bit more about Black privilege. And so there is a shift regarding economics, even amongst, BIPOC and brown individuals in a position. And because we're starting to become more there's more of us that are starting to have the green to back up what we are saying, and it does open doors for us to be able to go to different places and to be able to possibly shift narratives or even literal policies and laws, because we can pay for lobbyists to take care of particular things. Then I'm wondering what your thoughts are about how you think we should utilize our power, because when we're looking at it from the standpoint of legacy, and universities where sometimes people have misused that power in order to kind of get away with things for, hundreds of years, frankly, that weren't BIPOC, but, now that BIPOC is, starting to be able to acknowledge that we are increasing economically, that we are at tables that, at once we were not, that we have a top 10 list of, the best places to live in the United States of America as Black people, because of the fact that they're starting to produce a lot more millionaires and entrepreneurs and individuals of higher levels of education. So when we're looking at those things, like, how do we utilize our power and privilege?
Well, first I want to say we've always had wealthy Black people. Once slavery was ended and the enslaved people were allowed to go free, we built Black wealth. I know everyone talks about Tulsa in 1921, but there were, I believe, at least 7 other, wealthy communities similar to Tulsa that were destroyed, by white people who were angry about these Black, formerly enslaved Black people who became doctors and lawyers and teachers and bankers and created these super wealthy communities, and it wasn't because we wanted to be separate, it was because out of need. White people weren't going to represent us as lawyers. They weren't going to provide top rate, care as physicians. They weren't going to educate our children. So we had no choice. But at the same time, we excelled. We built these wealthy communities, and like I said, they were destroyed. So there have always been wealthy Black people, not just communities, but there have always been wealthy Black individuals throughout our history in the U.S. So I just wanted to add that point. In terms of leveraging that power, how we leverage it, it's difficult to say, and just speak in general terms, because people are going to lobby for whatever their interests are. And I can't say that in America we are altruistic. I can't say that in America, setting aside, race and gender, that, we want to see things work for the benefit of the whole, for the community. That to me is more of an Eastern philosophy, particularly Japan. Japan is always about what's good for the whole, what's good for the community. The US and
Africa too.
in Africa, thank you. Certain countries within Africa. Africa is a continent. But in America, it's all about me, myself, and I. We talk about this fallacy of the self-made man. There's no such thing. So I don't know, how we could, shift that and come together altruistically as a community, because like I said, there's always been wealth in our communities. There's always been individuals who are super wealthy. Obviously they have been behind the scenes navigating and pushing to make things better for themselves as well as the community. But I don't know, just speaking generally, like what we could do as a community of people to leverage our wealth as a whole, to achieve, to achieve an agenda. I always used to ask my father, because my father was a baby boomer, civil rights activist. And I used to be like, Dad, what happened? You had this community of people who were unified. Yes, there were differences in the approach, but they were unified in a goal. They wanted to be treated as equals. They wanted to be treated as citizens of this nation. And so, the Black community during the civil rights era seemed to be like so unified. And then you get to the end of the 70s and the 80s and crack, cocaine, drugs, and gangs and murder. And I used to be like, Dad, what happened? We were so unified. We were all with one accord, so to speak. And then, I guess with the passing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the slaying of, some of our leaders, it almost seemed like our community was adrift. And obviously the things that entered our community were targeted and intentional, but we allowed them to destroy, we allowed them to destroy that unity that we once had. And we became like our oppressors, and it became all about me, myself, and I instead of what's good for the community. And my father never really had an answer for me because I was like, Dad, it's your generation's fault. Like you guys dropped the ball. Look at what you've done. And he never really had an answer for me. And so I guess that's kind of where I just paused when you asked that question, like, what could we do? Because we've never actually circled back to that unity as a community.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
As far as what I do, corporately in my career, in my job, I would say it's a little smaller, but the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step, right? And if you change one life, you've changed the world, even if that one life is yours. So, I definitely seek to provide opportunities to the folks on my team. But, one of the things that I do in my role is we hire law firms to work with us and handle litigation. And so I'm always actively seeking out, law firms. I look at their roster. I look to see how many Black lawyers they have. I look to see how many Black women they have. And then I look to see who's an associate and who's a partner, who's at the top of the food chain, and I actively seek out the Black person, whether they're an associate or a partner. I'll reach out to them directly. And so I'm very targeted in terms of, the people that I work with, the firms that I select, because to me, diversity is not a slogan. It really should be a conscious decision that is exemplified by who's in your ranks, not only the associate level, but who's got a seat at the table and that partner level. So, those are the things that I do, in my day-to-day. I actually looked at some statistics for you. There have been only 70 of the 3,843 judges on the federal bench, because there's a difference between federal and state. The US Supreme Court is part of that federal system. There's only been 70 Black women. That is less than 2% of all federal judges. And I'm talking about since the federal system was incepted to this day. So that's less than 2% have been Black women. So to say that I'm excited, ecstatic is just, I'm super excited, super excited. And I definitely think she was the right choice. I know there were some early discussions about, oh, we should look beyond the schools. And in a perfect world, we'd be able to. But if Justice Jackson hadn't had a Harvard degree, that would just be one argument that the naysayers would make to challenge her, competency for the role. And it's unfortunate because I do stand by my earlier point that just because you go to Harvard or Yale doesn't mean you're the most brilliant lawyer ever. But unfortunately, in the society in which we live, that law school says something. People respect the name Harvard, and it's distinct to the U.S. Like, it's not a thing in other countries. Like, it's a U.S. thing. But I was like, no, she had to be a Harvard graduate. Because you don't need them, trying to think of reasons why this woman isn't qualified. She's more than qualified, and I think she's phenomenal. I think she's going to be an amazing addition, to the bench. And I'm super excited. Can't wait for the nomination to go through.
Yes, I agree. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Now, I would like to ask you, if you don't mind sharing, why you chose the judicial system, to become a lawyer, and if there's any life lessons that you feel like you extracted from your experience as a lawyer that you'd like to share. And you've been sharing them all through the process, just so you know. But just so
I'll tell you a story.
Okay.
And I didn't realize this until, and you can appreciate this being a doctor in the mental health field. So I was 14 years old, A-type personality, always have been, always wanted to get straight A's. And so it was near the end of the semester, the first semester. I was a freshman in high school. I was in a gym class, and I don't even remember what upset me. We were playing basketball or something, and I slammed the basketball down. I think the gym teacher had said something to me, and I was upset. I slammed the basketball down. Up to that point, perfect attendance, excellent student. I had a 14-year-old girl. I had a moment. So the gym teacher rewards me with a C on my transcripts for my grades. I had straight A's, and he gave me a C, which kicks me off the honor roll, kicks me off the high honors. I don't get high honors, nothing. So I go to my father and I'm like, Dad, this isn't right. I mean, with gym, it's all about participation. Did you show up every day? Did you participate? You get an A, right? So I went every day. I participated every day. So I'm like, Dad, this isn't right. I need you to go to talk to this guy. He needs to change my grade. My father goes, he knows the guy. They like grew up together or something. I was in the hallway and I overheard the gym teacher name. I think his name was Mr. Jennings. I overheard him say he wanted to teach me a lesson. What that lesson was, I don't know. But my father didn't advocate for me. He didn't advocate for me. He didn't get my grade changed. So I was, and see, people don't understand the ripple effect of that. So at the end of my high school career, whereas I could have been number 1 or number 2, I was number 5 out of the 200 plus students. Wow. All because this gym teacher who wants to teach me a lesson gave me a C. This is devastating because I had a moment in a gym class. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't realize at the time that effect that whole situation had on me in terms of advocacy and wanting to be a voice for someone who didn't have a voice. I'm a 14-year-old girl thinking my father would advocate for me, and he failed me. He didn't advocate for me. And unfortunately, as a 14-year-old girl, I didn't have a voice. No one was going to listen to me. And so that was something that stayed with me. And I know that that's what influenced me to follow this path, because I'm an advocate, not just for myself, but for others who don't have a voice. I'm a voice for those who don't have a voice, or for those who don't know how to use their voice. And so I advocate for them, and I work to help them own their voice, recognize their voice, and own their voice. So that is why I chose the legal profession. I didn't know it at the time. And I didn't have that aha moment and make the connections until years later when someone asked me the same question you did, like, why law? Like, I used to think it was because when I was in college, I worked in a hospital and I was going to be a doctor, and all the doctors were like, no, be a lawyer. And I'm like, okay, I'll be a lawyer. I used to think that was why. But then I realized that, you know what, that wasn't why. Because people can say stuff like that to you all the time. It just rolls off your back. But I realized that it was like, nope, that experience, that one little experience, I realized, yeah, I have to be that voice.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And my hope is that that encourages, some of our viewers as well to be able to acknowledge that they do have a voice that, someone will listen to and hear, and that it's
Yes.
important for them to speak up and advocate on their behalf and even on the behalf of others, in a way that will be effective. And law is definitely an effective way to be able to utilize your voice to make some changes happen.
Absolutely. You know, after you go to law school, you just never see the world the same. You never think about the world the same. People say lawyers are liars, and that's a misconception. You know, um, one of the easiest ways I can explain it is it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. So when it comes to evidence, you may know A, B, and C, but A, B, and C may not be admissible. And so it's not that you're lying or trying, you can't. I mean, lawyers are held to such a high standard ethically. You could be disbarred for lying, misrepresenting facts or evidence, to the court. So like we can't lie. I mean, that's why like you'll see people, if they know their witness is going to lie on their stand, they're like, I can't put you on the stand. I can't condone perjury. Perjury is basically just lying on the stand. Like I could lose my law license. So, we don't lie. We're held to a super high ethical standard. Truth is not black and white when it comes to the law. It's all about the rule of evidence, how evidence is collected, and that's either civil or criminal. Doesn't matter. There are rules of evidence for both types of cases. And it's really, not what you know, it's always about what can you prove. And sometimes that's frustrating even for lawyers. It's like, I know this person is not telling the truth, or I know that this didn't happen the way, it's being, presented. But if you can't prove it, you're stuck, and you have to find some way to try and convince the jury that, your position is the correct one.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, it definitely is a very important job. And I'm so glad to know that there are those who are a representation, and also, making sure that law is practiced in a very balanced, nuanced way, and a very competent way. And, I say that because not only do I know that you are definitely a great lawyer, but then also being a great person. And then also seeing that, how much difference it makes to be able to incorporate people that have, a lot of different backgrounds in order to be able to look at law from slightly different perspectives in order to provide the best approach to being able to look toward evidence and to be able to, derive the truth. Through law. And so I'm so glad that you're one of the lawyers that's a part of the of the
Thank
judicial.
you. I appreciate that. I mean, perspectives do matter. Like my experience, my perspective, it really matters, particularly when you're having a jury trial, and you're looking at a case. So one of the types of cases that I am involved in quite a bit are law enforcement cases. We oftentimes, however, represent the police and the police departments. So you won't hear me opining in public forums about any type of police cases because we may actually represent them. So I have to be very careful. But when I talk about my perspective is that, okay, I can tell you my perspective as a lawyer, but then I can also tell you my perspective as a Black woman on a jury looking at the facts of this case. And I'm going to tell you that this narrative is not going to play well. And we need to settle this case, and vice versa. I could say, okay, these are the facts, this is the issue. Okay, as a Black woman, here's my take. If I was on the jury, here's my take. And so, that perspective matters. I mean, strategy is such a huge part of what we do as lawyers. Juries find the facts, right? The judges make decisions on laws. So a lot of times you have to go, and I'm speaking more on the civil, criminal, it applies too. You got to tell a compelling story. or whatever side you're on. In the civil context, you're either defense or plaintiff. In the criminal context, you're the state or the defendant. So you have to tell a compelling narrative, whichever side you fall on. And I'd have to say, defense attorneys in the civil side, they're not always good at telling good stories. So I'm always like, and predominantly all of my work is defense related. So it's like, come on, guys, you got to give me good story.
Yeah. Well, I think that's something to be said about, brown people, because we share our history through narratives.
Yes.
And so stories, we're great at, well, I don't want to generalize, but generally speaking, Black people are great at sharing stories, and that's the way they keep, heritage going, is through that expression. But also what you just let me know completely sounded almost like Shonda Rhimes writing literally the series The Bull, Bull, his team of lawyers.
Yes.
It's so literally, that's what it sounded like. I'm
it's
like,
true.
Shonda Rhimes should be writing about.
It's so true. So like lawyers, you get all caught up in your legal arguments. Juries, that stuff is boring. I don't know if you've ever sat on a jury.
Once. That was enough.
Yeah, so like it's not what you see on TV, right? And then the worst part is when the judge reads you the jury instructions. That's like the worst part, because sometimes it's so long, it's so convoluted, it's so much legalese, folks in the jury are going to sleep. But it's like, if you tell them a good story, they're going to be eating popcorn if they can, and you got to keep people engaged. In the criminal context, it's literally life and death. In the civil context, it's generally monetary, but still, you want to keep people engaged, because to non-lawyers, the law stuff, the legalese, it's boring.
This particular channel is as a resource to not only individuals that may need to, potentially have to contact someone, but also for those who may like to have a distal mentor. So it ranges from those who may be considering law to those who may need some support regarding law. Yeah. So then it's a nice mix, but at the same time too, again, you're great with sharing with regards to what you share. So it's not a dull moment with you. And so
try not to be dull.
It's no dull moment with you. And so with that being said, though, since I did mention Bull, which is, again, I think a great show. I literally like that show, literally do like that show. But if there is someone that would like to connect with you, is there a way that they can connect with you professionally?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn under Kim Bush, company Allied World. So yeah, and then they can send me a message on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much for being a part today. And I'm going to ask everyone, to please subscribe to this channel, to like and share this particular episode if you found it helpful. And also, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, you have a great one.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cunningham.